to OverBoost 26. OverBoost is a podcast interview series featuring discussions with speedrunners about their history in speedrunning and gaming and the runs they're passionate about. I am your host, PMC Trilogy, and with me today is Froob. Froob, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. First time I've ever done something like this. This is cool.
Well, so this is a bunch of firsts because I know recently you got Twitch partner. Is that correct?
Yeah, just either last week or the week before. Very, very recently.
And so I wanted to ask if you felt like there was a particular thing or something that you did or something that happened to you that sort of put you on that path or put you over the edge to getting partner status.
I mean, the easy answer is obviously the Kiwami 2 run that I did for SGDQ a couple of months ago. But I've been speedrunning the Yakuza games for about 2 years now, and I've been kind of seeing steady growth until then. But it was the GDQ run that kind of pushed everything over the edge.
Yeah, I mean, I think that makes sense. I'm sure as well, you know, you could probably comment on the fact that I feel like the popularity and profile of the Yakuza series has also exploded in the time that you've been playing those games. So that definitely makes sense. That is really really neat. Do you have any goals now that you've made partner? Are you going to abandon Yakuza and do something else, or you know what have any doors open for you now?
Well, considering we've got a new Yakuza coming out in 3 days, probably unlikely. I do have a couple of goals still in mind. It was funny because like one of my big goals for speedrunning the Yakuzas was to one day get a Yakuza into either GDQ or RPG Limit Break, or just get somebody in the community to go into like GDQ or RPG Limit Break, and obviously that happened with me twice now. So it's kind of insane, actually.
Oh yeah, congratulations on that too, because you also got to run into. Oh yeah, I can't. You know, we were talking before we started recording I turned on the recording that at ESA 2017, which I think for both of us was our first time traveling out of the country by ourselves and our first times at live marathons. That actually we had runs back to back. I did Just Cause 300%, and then you did Titanfall 2. And so now, you know, it's funny that we're gonna have now Yakuza. It was 6.
Yes.
Okay, it's 6 at AGDQ 2021, and then I'll be doing a category of Just Cause 3, which is wild to me. That was my last submission. I liked the other 4 way more, and then my 5th slot, I didn't know what I wanted to submit, and I think I want to give the credit to Archmagus, who said, you know what, you should submit Just Cause 3 again. I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? But
nice.
Yeah, so
we were kind of surprised in the community. We've been saying since the SGDQ run it'd be awesome if we could get another Yakuza in, and we kind of had like a list of like all the Yakuzas that we thought were suitable for a GDQ event or not, and like I submitted things like 0, which is like 4 hours long, which we knew that wouldn't get in, but it's like you might as well submit it anyway. And we didn't actually have 6 on our list of probable acceptances until say like a PC version came out or somebody ran the PS4 Pro version, which is like 10-15 minutes faster. And I think we're all surprised. I'm genuinely surprised.
So, well, that's great. I don't know. I'm really excited for that because I think I had heard that speculation from watching Tapioca's channel about what games are likely to get in, and to see an even longer game get in is just exciting. I think we all speculate on what gets in the GDQ, and seeing longer games from a series like Yakuza get in feels great. It feels like, Yakuza is here. Let's keep going. And, hopefully that continues to be a trend for the future. But enough about the future. Let's go to the past. Where does video gaming start for you?
Oh, a very, very long time ago. I should preface that I'm getting on in my years at the minute. I am 33 this year. I've been noticing the past few days. I've got grey coming in my beard now. It's all happened. But when I started games was when I think I was 3, ironically enough. My parents, for a wedding anniversary gift, got a Sega MegaDrive with Sonic the Hedgehog 1, and that's pretty much where I began. Back when I was like 3, my parents used to be madly addicted to games themselves. Their favorite game, I can't believe I get to say this, their favorite game was Bubsy 1. of all games, and it's kind of fascinating because they've kind of gravitated obviously away from games, and I gravitated more towards them. But the Mega Drive was definitely like my way into games. And I guess with Sonic, obviously a interesting, like fast but solid game to get started with whenever you play games. Also had Echo the Dolphin as well, but I think we all know what Echo the Dolphin is like, and my parents were like, yeah, that's not for a 3-year-old.
So most of the Mega Drive stuff you played was the Sonic stuff, or were there any other big ones for you?
The ones that I enjoyed the most that I definitely remember are definitely the Sonic series, all the way from obviously 1 to 3 and Knuckles. I had a couple of other things as well. We had Desert Strike, which that was definitely probably the hardest game, if I remember rightly, which is a long, long time ago. I think that was like the hardest game I could get my head around as a kid, because obviously like it's kind of like tank controls a little bit, and like as a kid, just trying to figure that out was just like, yeah, all right.
But let me tell you, they're still hard. Not like a year ago, I tried to challenge Tapioca to doing a blind race of Soviet Strike. Didn't happen.
Oh, nice.
But
I love those games. They're great.
They're cute. They're cute.
Yeah. But just usual. I think when I was growing up, I think a lot of the 2D platformers, Pugsy, Wiz and Liz, yeah, just more stuff like that. Lots of things I just can't remember. I think Lost Vikings as well. Yeah, stuff like that.
That's the Lost Vikings. That's the Blizzard one or the Bethesda one? Which one? It's
Yes,
Blizzard. Okay, Blizzard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I believe available on GOG these days, or the Blizzard store. I'm not sure which. Every time I see it, I kind of just like get those memories of like playing it as a kid and just thinking back to myself, like, I'll probably get this again at some point and just try it out again and see if my memory holds up. But it's always one of those fears that if your memory doesn't hold up very well about the game, that it's just like, I've made a mistake here.
You know, I have found, because I'm about your age, and I have found it's like 50-50. Some things hold up really well, and some things don't.
Yeah, that's always the worry when you go back and look at older games. It's like my game backlog goes all the way back to the PS1, and it's like, even though my game backlog goes back that long, it's like I look at some of those games, I'm like, is it really a good idea to try those these days? Probably not.
Well, from the Mega Drive, where did things go for you then? I mean, did you said maybe PSN backlogs. I don't know if you went to PS1 or did you stay in a Sega household, or what happened? I
went to PlayStation 1 next. My parents, for I don't know how old I was, for one of my birthdays, treated me to a PlayStation 1 with Crash Bandicoot 1. Yeah. I liked Crash Bandicoot 1 as a kid, revisited it recently with the Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy, and was like, did I really enjoy this? So that kind of ties back into like the whole, you know, is this a great idea to revisit? But the PS1 was probably the era where I started to really get into games. I was still quite young at the time, and I'm fairly certain my parents at one point did buy me Grand Theft Auto, which is a little bit
one of the originals, or we're talking PS2?
Yes.
Okay, one of the originals.
Yeah, I still own the original 2 and London 1960 whatever it was. So they're in a box somewhere alongside, because I think around the time a family friend gave my dad what would have been my first PC, which was a Windows DOS 3.1 PC. I think we had floppies for Lemmings, Worms. We then got a Windows 95 PC like shortly after, and I think I've got the original CDs for the original Warcraft, Fate of Black, Another World. They're all here somewhere in quite good condition. I just don't know where they are. Even though I've been living here for 2 years, I'm still living out of boxes. Like,
that's what happens when you move. That's just, you can't avoid it. It's almost impossible. So you're mentioning you still have some of these things too. Some of these original. You still have the Mega Drive and the PS1 and all that.
Yep. The unfortunate thing about the Mega Drive is the way that the controller obviously goes in the controller port with all the little metal bits on the inside. One of them on the PlayStation, on the Player One side of things, is unfortunately snapped during one of the house moves somehow and unplayable now, which sucks. I guess there might be a way to fix it, but I'm not 100% sure how to do that myself. So it's kind of collecting dust, unfortunately. But I've never ever sold any console. that I've had. So I've still got all my consoles.
Well, maybe I'll ask about this milestone. This is a question that I cooked up and I always love asking, which is, at this point, you're clearly still playing video games. I think we've established that. At what point do you feel like, whether it was a product of, saving money from odd jobs or getting a real job and saving up money, at what point did you really take ownership of your video gaming? And that can mean buying a console. That can mean, buying your own computer so that it's not like a family computer. Do you have maybe a point in time where you'd fix that to?
N64. The N64 was the first console I bought, which is a great little story because I lived... When I was quite young, I lived in a village called Tilehurst, which is in a city called Reading, which is like 30-40 minutes away from London via train, so it's pretty much London. It's like the central train hub for the south of the UK. And the place where I bought my N64 from, the video game shop there, used to be, before that, a greengrocer's owned by my old man. Like, it's just one of those ironic things that I didn't know about at the time. And it was kind of one of those like really cool things to find out when he told me. But yeah, the N64, it was funny because the N64 I bought myself with money that I saved up for like years and years and years. And I couldn't actually buy any games with it at the time because it was so expensive. So that first night that I bought an N64, we went to Blockbusters and rented out Mario Kart.
That's a really good. I love explaining to people, like sometimes I'll play games that I remember renting and explain to people, yes, I remember renting this from Blockbuster.
Yep. It was always better to rent the cartridge stuff because the disc-based stuff, it was always a crapshoot whether the disc would be scratched to just not working or not.
Yeah, no, I hear you there. Well, so going on from there, N64, we're still all firmly at home with that, but the past 2 decades have seen a lot of big phases in multiplayer gaming, online gaming, things like that. And I know that the stuff we'll be discussing, Yakuza, Titanfall 2, Attack on Titan, these are all single player campaigns that we speedrun. And so I wanted to get a sense of, have you been big into any of these things, League of Legends, World of Warcraft, etc.?
Yeah. So I guess I should preface this with a little quickie. When I was, it was either 12 or 13, I started suffering from severe agoraphobia and depression. And one of the things that basically kept me going was online games. For the vast majority of my teenage years, it was Counter-Strike 1.6. It was just Counter-Strike. I don't know. It's funny because like my old...
That's the best Counter-Strike, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. Like, I hated it when it went to Source. I was just like, no, I don't like this. I can't play this. But like, with my old clanmates, and I call them clanmates, we just basically each other each weekend. Basically, I actually know some of them in real life still, which is like really cool. I don't remember how I got to know them outside of one person. I guess he introduced me to the rest, and that was via Phantasy Star Online for the Dreamcast, which also was, at the time, something kind of unparalleled, being like an almost MMO but on a console. And I absolutely fell in love with PSO. So PSO led me into Counter-Strike, and then Counter-Strike unfortunately led me into the dark world of MOBAs. I started with Heroes of Newerth, and if you've ever heard about Heroes of Newerth and its community, oh boy, yeah, I've experienced that, all right? I'm fairly certain in my first game I was told to off myself, which is wonderful community.
All right,
and then
I need to make a confession. I am one of those people. I played original Dota, and we used to run a thing where did you ever play original Dota?
Not original Dota. Hon was my first encounter with MOBAs.
Okay, but of course the premise is that it was a map for Frozen Throne, right? And if you got into BattleNet and you didn't have the map downloaded, you would start downloading the map in the BattleNet client in the game. Now, that was bad etiquette. If you showed up to a Dota match and you didn't already have the map downloaded, you would normally just get kicked. But what me and my friends would do is we would see someone downloading the map and we would ask Charmander or Squirtle. and if you said Charmander, we kicked you right away. And then if you said
Nice.
Squirtle, we waited until it got to 99 and then kicked you. So
Yeah,
MOBAs. Yeah,
also-
Han, a lot of my friends went on to play Han. By the time Han came out, I had gotten out of it. I know a few Han hero names, but I was too busy being an irresponsible alcoholic in college to play Han. And so I had largely checked out of it, but I'm a little familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's ironically how I fell out of Dota. According to Steam, which I guess I don't really want to have a look at how many hours I put into Dota right now. In Dota 2, I put in 2,280 hours. The last time that I properly played Dota was back in, it looks like 2014. I was also somebody that back then fell into the toxic kind of side because, like, at the time when I was still working through like the agoraphobia and issues like that, I kind of used it as an unfair outlet to get like a lot of crap out, which I really shouldn't have done. And I regret it immensely to this day. But like when I was going through university and I was like going out with friends, I kind of realized I don't like the way that MOBAs are making me go. I don't like the person that I am. I don't like what I'm turning into. And I'm fairly certain that you always hear these like horrible stories about like grooming kids and stuff like that. I'm fairly certain somebody alt-right was trying to do that with me, and at that point it was just like, yep, nope, I'm out, bye. And I've never touched MOBAs again. Thankfully. I'm a much better person because of it.
Yeah, no, it seems like I would have to agree with that. I don't know if I had that kind of encounter, but certainly I think the friends of mine who keep playing MOBAs seem to maintain some level of toxicity in their life, and it's not good for anybody. Was that kind of maybe the end of your big multiplayer gaming then? By the time you checked out of MOBAs like Han, or have you still kept up with it? Any of the modern games, Rocket League, Overwatch, that kind of stuff, or battle royales?
Yeah, I dabble in stuff every so often. Funnily enough, every time there's a patch for Apex, me and a friend usually get together and do some of that. In fact, we did some of that this morning. Never serious anymore. Just for good fun. Because funnily enough, like when I was doing Dota, I was apparently in the top 3% of all Razor players at one stage. Which I was somebody that. It's kind of funny because like I'm somebody that gets quite addicted to some things if I let myself, which is why with multiplayer games I kind of took a step back. But it also helped because my PC at the time actually broke. So I couldn't do any PC games at all. So everything I didn't want to do, like my favorite were always FPS. I didn't want to do FPSs on consoles, so I just kind of went away from like the multiplayer scene at that point.
All right, well, let's maybe move on to a different kind of gaming then, which is speedrunning. How did you first learn about speedrunning?
Oh boy, let me. So there's on stream. There's this little inside joke that Froob has a million body horror stories. So I will try and keep this exceptionally short and not detailed. But when I was this requires a little bit of an explanation and a bit of backstory to this. When I was in university during my first year, there was there was one night in December where you know how teenagers are in university where we do dumb stuff. There was one night in university, and my university was situated like it was a seaside kind of place. Like it was literally where our dorms were like literally right next to like the sea, and it was not a temperature that I was used to. And I did something dumb that night. I'm not going to say what. And next week, I was in the hospital with pneumonia. And it's funny because I went to university one day. It took me like 45 minutes for what is only a 10-minute walk. And then I went into my class. My teacher said, "Why are you here?" And I can't remember anything after that because the next time I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. But that pneumonia I managed to obviously get over after like the first year. Came back in year 3, but I managed to catch it as it was coming back. So I managed to kind of stave it off then. But the trouble with that, the pneumonia had messed up my liver really badly. It had given me what the doctors called a fatty liver. And this fatty liver created a lot of excess acid. I'm not going to go into the details here, but that excess acid caused very nasty internal damage and gave me what is called a para-umbilical hernia. If anybody wants to know what that is, you can happily Google it yourself. I'm not going to get into the nasty details of that, but I've never been in as much physical pain as that in my entire life, and it was excruciating. I couldn't sleep for more than like an hour at a time, because like every time I'd even slightly move in my sleep, I'd just be in the most insane pain that I've ever been in my life. And kind of as a way to deal with that, I was hanging out a lot in that was when I was like really starting to get into Twitch at that point, not streaming myself but watching others. And who was it? I think I was watching Cherno TV at the time, and I got to know a couple of his community members, and one of them, Bloody Seraph, who is one of my mods still today actually, they did a small stream that night that I watched, and they played this little doujin game called Grief Syndrome, which is based on the Puella Magica Magica series, the anime series, and it's basically like a small 2D platformer. You got to kill enemies, kind of a la Streets of Rage, only on a 2D plane. You have special abilities and stuff like that, and whilst I was watching, I was getting quite engrossed, and at the time, like if you look at the leaderboards now, there's like 20 different categories, but at the time there weren't that many like runs or runners for it. So I decided to ask, how can I do this? I'd quite like to run it, and that was how I started speedrunning. Was just a way to kind of ignore the fact that I was in immense pain that would never go away.
I wanted to double back there for a second, because I'm always uncertain in these interviews which question to ask first, which is, when did you get into speedrunning, and when did you learn about streaming? Sounds like you already were watching Twitch before you found out about speedrunning. What's that story? Yeah,
I think it happened during, funnily enough, my final year of university. I'd done, weirdly enough, a stream or two beforehand, not being a proper streamer, not knowing anything about what I was doing. I had a friend when I was in university who was going through some hard times, and he, ironically enough, going back to the multiplayer thing, just wanted to watch some Battle Royale, and at the time I just did 2 or 3 games of armor-free Battle Royale, which was really cool. And then when Valkyria Chronicles PC port came out, I did a stream for that, and despite the fact that I wasn't a big streamer, I remember at the time seeing I had 70 odd viewers. So it was always one of those did I make a mistake not carrying on streaming, etc.? I don't think that was a mistake by not, because obviously I was very inexperienced at the time, very, very immature, very much still a kid in university. But because of that, I kind of transitioned to having a browse on Twitch and just seeing oh hey, there's an actual culture of people who actually just stream games, and I really can't remember. I think the main reason that I used Twitch in the first place was to watch esports. Even though I don't play Dota myself anymore and haven't for years, I'll still watch the International every time it's on. For example, I'll still watch the Capcom Pro Tour, even though I haven't been in fighting games since the PlayStation days. It's one of those things where it's just kind of it was a nice easy transition to just having a browse on Twitch and seeing, I kind of like these people and what they're playing. Originally with Cherno was probably one of my first streamers that I watched as a personal streamer, and obviously your Lyrics and your Dan's Gaming, etc. And then I kind of trickled that down when I started speedrunning to finding other speedrunners and just smaller streamers, and just watching more smaller streamers than larger streamers.
Yeah, no, I definitely hear that. I have a very similar story where I learned about Evo, so I watched Evo on Twitch, and then things went from there. So I definitely hear that. So we talked about you were watching Twitch, you watched some streamers like Cherno, other folks. At what point do you say I want to do? I mean, so you mentioned because of the pain that you started doing it yourself. Was that Grief Syndrome game your first speedrun then that you streamed on Twitch?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, any percent Mammy, which at the time there weren't many runners for. I basically cut 10 to 15 minutes off that run, and I held the world record for that for a good 2-3 years. And it's funny because over the years I was if there's any speedruns that I will fight to keep my record for, it's that and Yakuza 0. But then it's funny because somebody came back after I hadn't been played the game for like 18 months, got world record. I played it for the first time in 18 months, got world record back instantly. And then after that, I kind of realized I don't really care about world records. I just want to have fun. And that's the like other side of like my speedrunning story, is going from being hyper competitive to just being like, I just want to do this for fun. Like, I just enjoy it these days.
Well, on that note, I want some speedrunning takes from you.
Go on.
What now? This one, normally I'm pretty certain that I know this one before I ask it. Of all the speedruns that you've done, what's your favorite? I don't know if I know this one for you. I don't think I have a good guess.
It might surprise a lot of people that it's not a Yakuza game. It's Titanfall 2. It is very much Titanfall 2. Titanfall 2 was probably, even though Grief was like my first speedrun, and then I did about a month or two of Hotline Miami 2 runs after that. It was the game after that, which was Titanfall 2, which was like the first speedrun that I ever really got into. I mean, really got into. When I started speedrunning Titanfall 2, I think there were only 6 or 7 runs on the board instead of like today where there's like hundreds. And I think there was, the only people on the board at the time were, I believe, Dr. T-Chops, Blood Thunder, Angry Albino, who was the world record holder at the time, Brian Arto, and somebody else whose name I don't remember. And yeah, when I came into Titanfall 2 is very bittersweet because like when I came into the Titanfall 2 scene, there were not a lot of runners, and it was the year that it started to come out, and we found some cool things. I think Blood Thunder found the first Out of Bounds, which was, I think Blood Thunder found the one that was on Into the Breach 3, I think. I might be wrong on that. But essentially, like, we were just very, very small community at the time, and it was nice because, like, I don't know, Blood Thunder and T-Chops weren't exactly around for a massive amount of time, but Brian Arto came in, and Angry Albino was there, and it wasn't just the three of us, but, like, Titanfall 2 was kind of like the first speedrun community that really gave me a sense of community. Whilst Grief was kind of like a thing with friends, and whilst Hotline Miami was something that I didn't want to touch with a 10-foot barge pole, Titanfall 2 was just great because it was just a couple of folks at first just hanging out, having fun, and then we really started to push that run. And it's funny because I've always said this, I've said this time and time again, I have no end of, like, respect for Brian Arto, because Bri is somebody that I will always look toward as an amazing member of a community, because Bri, over the years, took kind of hold of the Titanfall community and shaped it into what it is today. And I don't think it would be as good as it is today if it wasn't for Bri, for example. Even though, like, Angry Albino did, like, most people think Bri did the first Titanfall 2 run at GQ, but it wasn't. It was actually Angry Albino, and Bri was on his couch. I obviously couldn't make it because I was in, obviously, England. But, like, it was fantastic, like, seeing that. And then people started to notice, like, Titanfall 2 as a run. And then we started finding, like, all the really cool lap bounds and skips and stuff, which is how, obviously, then Bri got the run into, like, I think it was, like, an SGDQ the next year. And that's the run that everybody kind of goes, oh, wow, it's that amazing Titanfall run. So, yeah, I
think it was the SGDQ 2019, which ended up being, like, the run with the highest audience amount in the whole event, which is incredible. You know, and incredible to think that it went from, you know, as you said, a well-liked game with a small dedicated community to now this is the most watched game live at SGDQ.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those bittersweet things, because, like, I always, even though I've not been a part of the community for years, I always look back every so often just to see, like, how everybody's doing. Like a proud dad in some sense is just like, yeah, that's all the kids are doing good these days. But Titanfall 2 is, like, it's very bittersweet because it's the speedrun that on one hand is the thing that really got me into speedrunning, but on the other hand, it's also the thing that kind of pushed me away from competitive speedrunning. Because when I was doing Titanfall 2 runs, I only had a 1 PC set up at the time. I have a 2 PC set up now, and I still have this thing. but the PC that I was doing runs on started showing some really weird things. It started crashing every so often, and it got to the point where I could only do one run per day. I couldn't reset. I couldn't do anything. My PC would last about an hour and 45 minutes while playing a game before it just hard crashed completely. That thing, we replaced everything except the CPU and the GPU inside, and wouldn't you know it, we're fairly certain that it's the CPU now. It's cursed, and it's my streaming PC still broken as hell. Like, did a 24-hour Yakuza marathon that it crashed in the middle of. It's still going somehow. But it's kind of like, when I was doing, it's ironic because like the very first iteration of the Guinness Book of World Records for video game speedrunning, I'm in third place. Because the 1 week that I was third in the world, they actually took the records of everybody for the book, and that's how I got my name in the Guinness Book of World Records. But that's also, interestingly enough, the time when my PC started dying. And it was funny because when my PC died, I was really in the community at the time, and I couldn't see it myself. And it wasn't until my PC properly broke and I started not being able to do runs that I noticed, oh, this is like that old attitude I had when I was playing MOBAs. And it was like, I don't like this. I don't like the person that I am. So it was kind of like a very bittersweet thing, and I had to, not through no fault of my own, I had to say goodbye to Titanfall. Like, a run I genuinely adored and was getting better at. And I could do Titanfall again these days, but it's kind of, whilst I love the run, and I dearly love the run, it's kind of like, I know what I'm like, and I'll get very, upset isn't the right word, but I'll get very annoyed at myself and my skill level and how long it will take to get back to even just the levels that I'm at, even though since the levels that I was at, there's now been like 10 minutes of extra time save. It would take me so long that I would just get frustrated and end up probably hating the run again. So it's one of those things where, as much as I want to do the run again, I kind of want to leave it. I kind of feel like I've had my time, if that makes sense.
Let's do an easier one then. Let's flip it. Of all the runs you've done, what's your least favorite?
Hotline Miami 2.
Yeah. Okay. I thought that was foreshadowed there. I was like,
yeah. No hesitation. There's a couple of factors for the reason as to why. I think that I made a mistake picking Hotline Miami 2 instead of Hotline Miami 1. Hotline Miami 1 had... The speedrun of Hotline Miami 1 had an insane 7 to 8 hour YouTube tutorial by Snowfats detailing every single instance of every single level, how the AI is set up, how the AI reacts, and how you can tell via like positioning, what weapon they have, how they're going to react. None of that matters to HM2. It's all a crap shit. Like, that game is awful. It's not awful. I like the game still, but it's awful. As a speedrun, and I say this a couple of times, as a speedrun, there are some games that are great, casually, that just don't translate well to speedrun. And Hotline Miami 2 isn't like the worst speedrun in the world, but with the way that Hotline Miami 2's levels are designed, way worse than Hotline. And I'm usually somebody that's quite patient with Hotline Miami 2, but I just very much agree that the level design is just way worse.
How about then a game that you would like to speedrun, but you haven't gotten around to it either for time reasons or because it doesn't fit in with what you're doing right now?
It's interesting because at the start of this year, I had 3 goals of runs that I wanted to learn. A Final Fantasy, a Grand Theft Auto, and a Resident Evil. And of those goals, I did one, I guess. I'd already done a little known fact, for the folks who didn't know me like way before this, is that when my PC died and I was looking for things to speedrun, one of the things that I actually did pick up was Final Fantasy 13, which is probably the hardest speedrun that I've ever done in my life. The speedrun guide for that is like 197 to 198 pages long. It's insane. It's amazing. But I still wanted to learn another Final Fantasy, and it was going to be between OG Final Fantasy VII and I believe OG Final Fantasy VI. And then an opportunity fell into my lap where, because of the world events that have happened this year, I actually managed to get Final Fantasy VII Remake a week and a half early. And ESA at the time, they knew that I had Final Fantasy VII Remake because I said about it. And they said to me, at the end of the marathon, which is 2 days after the official release of FF7R, would you like to just run through the game for us? And I was like, yeah, sure. So that was the first time that I've ever done like a playthrough of a game for the first time, not on stream, which was also like really weird. But it was also like a time constrained. I have to get through this and I have to start learning this run. So technically, I did a Final Fantasy run this year in Final Fantasy VII Remake. Haven't ever been able to go back to it, which I do kind of regret. I got some negative comments after that run, which were quite nasty actually. But I'd still like to go back to that run because like they found some really fascinating things in that run ever since I did that, like complete chapter skips, out of bounds, stuff like that. So I wouldn't mind going back to that if I could fit it in, which is not looking likely at them. The other one, I guess, I said originally, like, this year I wanted to learn a Resident Evil and a Grand Theft Auto. I keep gravitating away from Grand Theft Auto. I don't think there's anything wrong with GTA runs, but just there's something about it that just keeps pushing me away, despite the fact that I've been in the GTA series for such a long time. I do have a soft spot for certain GTAs, aka the PS2 ones. And Resident Evil just never materialized. Other than that, I don't think there's that much that I'm thinking that I would have liked to speedrun. There's always something, and again, it goes back to the beginning again. I wouldn't mind running a Sonic game, and a Sonic game would be a lot easier to digest than a couple of things. I guess there's one thing, which again is something that I did runs of for a good chunk of time for like half a year. I attempted to do runs of Bloodborne and then Dark Souls 3. And I know the exact reason why I gave up both is that there was always a boss that was my Achilles heel. For Bloodborne, it was Orphan. And for Dark Souls 3, it was Nameless King. And it's just, even though I was like pretty decent at the rest of the run and like all the tricks and stuff, I just couldn't deal with those two bosses, and it was just really infuriating, especially as both of those are near the end of both of their respective runs. So I kind of gave up on them. So it's kind of like a little bit of regret in regards to stuff that I used to do in the past, like 13, Bloodborne, Dark Souls 3, Final Fantasy VII Remake, that I'd love to be able to go back to, and I just never found the time.
No, that's fair. I mean, it sounds like you got a lot of thoughts about, you know, what you might want to fit in. Let's change tracks just a little bit. I wanted to ask, now we in your story of how you got into speedrunning and streaming and whatnot, we've already covered some health topics, but I wanted to ask, you know, in particular, we're about the same age. When it comes to things with, you know, having to do with, sitting for too long, repetitive motions, hands, wrists, stuff like that, is there anything that you do to mitigate that, or otherwise to take into account any sort of, stress injuries like that?
Yeah, actually, I got it here. I had to buy this the other day. It looks really weird. This is a foot roller. It's for plantar fasciitis. This was great. Before ESA 18, I believe it was. Yeah, 18. I got plantar fasciitis for the first time, which is, if nobody knows what plantar fasciitis is, on your foot, you have like the big ball at the back, and there's like a muscle inside of that. And I was getting really into getting fit at that point, because obviously with the hernia that I had beforehand, that made me balloon up to like 22 stone, which I should know what that is in kilograms, but I don't, I'm afraid. English systems of
I'm
metrics.
American. I don't know what kilograms are anyway.
Yeah. We don't know what anything other than a stone is. I don't even know what stone we're using. But yeah, I was doing exercise on my treadmill, and funnily enough, it was the first time I ever broke a bone, because the plantar fasciitis hit me while I was on that treadmill. And plantar fasciitis is basically, it's the muscle in the ball of your foot, and it kind of becomes, I don't know if it's like detached or whatever, but essentially it felt like my foot got either shot or ruptured right in the ball of it. And obviously I couldn't put any pressure on it. Fell off the treadmill and had a nasty little accident with my toes on that treadmill. So that was kind of the first time I've ever had plantar fasciitis, and plantar fasciitis is horrible because, like, it's like you can't put any pressure on your foot. And for me, my plantar fasciitis is not too bad, but it comes back every so often, and it's coming back with a bit of a vengeance at the minute, which is why I bought this. And actually, this is working out quite well. But I've never had like that good posture, which is not great. Funnily enough, this chair I'm sat on, which is starting to fall apart, bless it. I've had this chair for as long as I've been running. I think I've had this chair for like 15 years, which is not good. There's no cushion on the bottom of it anymore. I sit on basically just flat nothing, which you'd think would be quite uncomfortable, but I'm somebody my body just adapts to. The only time I've ever had like a really nasty injury was, again, during university, where I'm not sure what happened, but with my right hand, between like my index finger and my middle finger, this whole bit down to like almost my shoulder, whenever I moved my hand even slightly, I'd just be in insane pain. And I don't know what it was. It got fixed eventually, thankfully. We used I can't remember the name of the cream itself, but the cream had like components of like the stuff they used to make pepper spray. And I had one of those like braces on my hand, for example, but it got so bad to the point that putting on clothes just was just so painful. I got very lucky that it happened in my right hand because I'm actually left-handed. But that's pretty much the only thing that's ever been like kind of like a related injury to kind of like speedrunning and stuff like that. Nothing super serious, thankfully. I've always had bad posture, so obviously at the minute I've been exercising a lot more recently to try and get fit finally. I was on a real health conscious craze back in January, February. I started going to the gym for swimming, and then you'll never guess what happened. Shutting the gym down. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
No, I think a lot of folks, I feel like, have that story of, I was doing, some new health habit in 2020, and then
Yep.
and then turns out hindsight was 2020 in the end. So what are you gonna do about that?
Yeah.
All right. Well, so sometimes this segues very nicely, and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm gonna ask it anyway. I would like your takes on favorite and least favorite controllers.
Ooh.
Since we know that real Yakuza use a gamepad, I've learned that many times now.
Nice. I'm a sucker for the old classics. I obviously really like the DualShock. I would feel that the DualShock 4 would be my favorite iteration of the DualShock had it had better build quality. I'm currently on my third DualShock 4. I'm somebody that doesn't I don't treat my controllers with disrespect or anything like that, and the build quality is so bad. I've had R2 button, R1 button, the option button, X, circle, all break, stick drift, all of that jazz. People are gonna question me now. I didn't mind the N64 controller. I thought it was okay. I really like the Dreamcast controller. With controllers that I kind of hated, though. A lot of people would say this, but I have exceptionally small hands. So I think you know exactly where I'm going with this. The OG Duke controller for the original Xbox was way too big for me. Pure and simple. But I guess as far as out-and-out favorite controller would go, I would have to say GameCube.
The game, well, I don't know. I feel like now I understand, though, because you said you feel like you have small hands, and the GameCube. Because I think with the GameCube, some of the things are good. I think the shoulder buttons are interesting. The analog stick is good, but then you have maybe the worst D-pad of all time.
I'd agree with that. I was going to argue back about the D-pad of the DualShock 3 after running Final Fantasy 13, but no, I would agree that the D-pad on the GameCube controller is...
Oh, that's interesting, because I might have Stockholm Syndrome for the DualShock 3 D-pad now, because I've been doing all my Armored Core runs on a DualShock 3, And so I mean, and I've had the opportunity because I've played Armored Core games now on DualShocks 1, 2, and 3, PSTV and then PS2, PS1. And I don't know, something about the stiffness on the DualShock 3D pad just feels right for that. But maybe this could be specific to that or just my preference.
I think for me, it's probably because I've just used the DualShock 4's D-pad for too long now and just trying to go backwards. I don't like it. Face it, I didn't have that many problems with it at the time, but I don't know. There's something about how the D-pad for the DualShock 4 is like a bit more pronounced and a bit more outwards. I kind of like that a bit more. I'm interested in the DualSense, but I'm not paying that much for a new controller.
Yeah, I'm not in any rush to go for the next generation just yet. As tantalizing as whatever's going to go on with PS4 game load times and PS5, as interesting as that is to me, and I can only imagine what the Yakuza community thinks about that.
Yeah, we're going through the motions because if you look at the, ironically enough, if you look at the Yakuza 6 boards, we've got this running in-joke in the Yakuza community in a minute that Rebel is a massive cheater because he just has a PS4 Pro and the rest of us don't. So like it's been like a really weird and nice kind of like even playing field for the console Yakuzas because all of us have got like basic PS4s, basic hard drives and stuff like that. And then Rebel comes along with PS4 Pro and sets like a time that's like 10 to 15 minutes better than what I can even achieve on base PS4. So it's like, I guess it's the same with obviously going to be like the other speedrunning communities as well. When the PS5 comes out, even if there's like not better frame rate, the load times themselves are just going to be absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And it's funny because we get this a lot, and we get a lot of people who ask, like, why don't you split the Yakuza board via, like, different consoles and stuff? And the pure and simple reason is that we've never had the community for it before. When I started out in the Yakuza community, there were about 3 of us to begin with. It was myself, Tapioca, and Zanosa, who did the OG Yakuza games. Lily came along with Yakuza Kiwami, and then all of a sudden after that, we started getting newer runners every so often. And I think thanks to, like, obviously doing a couple of runs for ESA and obviously GDQ, I think we started to get more runners as well. And, like, Zero's always been the most popular one, but it's like, we've always said to people, like, speedrun.com itself has its own, like, platform filter. It's not ideal, but just use that, because like if we were to split up between like the different platforms and then split up between like PS4 and PS4 Pro, you'd have some boards that would have 1 run per category and it just wouldn't look very good. We also have like these discussions about difficulty settings as well, because like the obvious one is we run most of the time on easy, even though the runs aren't on easy, because it just is the fastest. And then obviously legend, because it's the hardest and challenging. But it's like not many people run on the in-between with normal and hard, so it's like, is there really a point for this, etc.? Kind of going into the whole, is there a big reason to split between console and PC or different consoles? The only series that has an actual split in it is K2, because we have a load remover, which makes it inherently unfair on console.
No, that makes sense. I think those are all discussions. Something I think about a lot when I'm looking at different games, and do you split out the platforms as categories, and there's a whole discourse to be had about that. Rather than necessarily get into that part of the discourse, though, I did want to maybe, while this is still the clock is ticking on calling this a current event, but recently, of course, there was news about Speedrun.com getting purchased by a company called Elo, which runs other websites like Dota Buff, things like that. And I feel like a lot of the initial takes either went one of 2 ways. And the one way was Speedrun.com kind of grew beyond Pac and his team's ability to maintain it, and the website's been suffering, and it's really going to be great to have some team, with actual, well, not actual, but like sufficient engineering capacity and knowledge to, bring it up to speed. And then you also had a lot of people who felt that Dota Buff over the years had gotten more paywalled features, and that this was a path to getting more paywalled features. And I was curious if you had a take, one way or the other, and just, anything that you would say about where Speedrun.com goes from here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I did actually have Dota Buff Premium for a while whilst I was obviously in my Dota phase. So when they bought speedrun.com, I was like very taken aback. The feeling that I have is, I would say, very pensive. I don't think that it's a bad thing, but I'm worried for what it might be. The thing that I really like about speedrun, or for the majority of speedrun, is that a lot of communities get by self-regulating. They regulate like the rules of the community and how everything's supposed to go, submissions, etc. I kind of like that. And I hope that would never ever change. But I guess we kind of saw it a little bit a while ago when Splits.io decided to also paywall some of its features, because whilst I'd never used Splits.io myself, I know a couple of people who did, and they were talking about how like Splits.io basically got rid of like comparison stuff unless you like paid for like the premium version of that, etc., or something along those lines. And it kind of like made me think back to that, in the I think that the new owners could be a good thing in expanding speedrun.com, but it's also, where does that expansion go? And how much of that do we see without paying a premium price? Because I feel like there will be something down the line that is a premium subscription model. I feel that it's an interesting thought, trying to think of like how big speedrunning itself has actually gotten, and how is it now something that you would consider mainstream? Like, to borrow an example, VTubers. VTubers often do little streams of like Minecraft or getting over it, and they call it via what the Japanese call it, which is like RTA. Like, they do their own speedruns, and it's kind of like, with the size of their audiences and how big like GDQ has gotten, speedrunning has got more mainstream. And just, I think that speedrun.com definitely needed something to give it a bit more of a boost going forward. Like, I feel like it did get too big for the current team, but I'm very, very pensive about what is going to happen. I obviously, having used Dota Buff, I think the premium stuff that was on Dota Buff was good, but at the same time, that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily translate well into speedrun stuff. Like, one of the things, again, that I do like about speedrunning and speedrun communities is that sense of community. It's like, in the Yakuza community, whenever we have new strats and stuff, we always share it with each other, because, you know, there's no reason to hold back on strats or anything like that, because people are going to see them anyway, and it makes you look like really a bit of an ass. Which is why we always share strats with each other, and I like that sense of community, but it makes me worried that, like, these features that, like, say, Splits.io got rid of, that I feel are going to get introduced to speedrun.com in a premium version in the future, that's the kind of stuff that would be, like, super useful for us to kind of utilize in speedrunning, and I just feel like it's going to be paywalled, and I don't like the thought of that at all.
Yeah, I think you're the first person I've heard to bring up the comparison to Splits.io. Splits.io is something I've used a lot, and I'm actually at this point still, I'm still I'm grandfathered into the Patreon, because I'm fortunate enough to be able to throw a few bucks here and there to different things, and so I really liked the way they had split up their free and non-free features before the premium features, and at some point, I think the head of it, Glacial, has tried to make it into a project where he could make it his living, and I was kind of worried about that, because at that point, I think what happened was more stuff got paywalled, and the first tier was kind of high. It was something like north of like $9-10 a month, which just was too much. I think you really gotta bring it down. And unfortunately, he still maintains it, but he abandoned it as a full-time thing when it didn't pan out, and I still upload my splits there, because it's I think you can still download splits free, which is like still a very useful feature to not have to make your own splits. Like, that is great, excellent. But it's a good comparison to think of why that didn't work, and what speedrun.com features would be paywalled like that in the future, maybe. So I don't know. It's good to think about. Let's talk about Yakuza. How so? Did you play games from this series before coming to it as a speedrun?
Yes. Yep. I own every physical version that's been available in the West. I began with the original Yakuza 1, which I don't remember the year it came anymore, but I have a friend. This was again back during like my days of like my agoraphobia, and I had a friend who their tastes were very similar to my tastes, and he kind of knew at the time that I really liked Shenmue, and he said to me, "You'll like this. It's like Shenmue." That's all he had to say, and I was like, "Okay." So for that Christmas, I asked my parents, "Hey, can you buy me this game called Yakuza?" And they bought me Yakuza, and honestly, I thought it was just alright. I didn't fall in love with it. I was just like, yeah, it's alright. It's pretty decent. It's not awful. And then the next year, the second game, Yakuza 2, came out. I bought that. They made sweeping changes where there wasn't like an English dub anymore. The load times were like way better. The fighting system was way better, and Yakuza 2 was where I fell in love. That was it. So I've been playing the game since the very beginning, but it's always like I've always told anybody at this point, it doesn't matter when you get into the series now. There's so many good ways. You've got obviously Zero, which is available on almost every console under the sun, and PC. You've got Like a Dragon coming out next week, which is supposedly another good entry point if you don't want to play the previous like 7 mainline games before that. It's one of those things that I really hate when people try and like gatekeep stuff like that. And it's kind of like the same as well in kind of speedrunning, I guess. There's no point in gatekeeping any of that. It doesn't matter. Like, I would never suggest to people to go back to like the original 2 as their first experience, but I would suggest to people if they could to go and check out the original version of Yakuza 2, just to kind of see like where the series has come from with like the kind of like Resident Evil style, like isometric camera angles and stuff like that, and how fights used to go back in those days compared to like these days. But I would never ever say like you have to experience these first, etc.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right though about the series. 'Cause I think I'm sort of a recent convert in that I think now I've played 0, K1, K2, 3. Still picking like one up a year, pretty much probably on PS4. But and you said people are gonna have hopefully, God, fingers crossed. I hope I have all the reviews I've read so far for Like a Dragon make it sound great, and so I'm excited for y'all to dig into that. Now I should mention for people listening, watching, the specific run that I watched for this was, of course, the SGDQ 2020 online run with Yakuza Kiwami 2, which I'm pretty sure I caught live, like the end of. I definitely remember seeing the Majima Saga part live, because I feel like I woke up and started my workday and put that on. That was there. So we talked a little bit about you first played the original 2. You've been there right from the start. Now, when did you make the decision to speedrun games? When did Yakuza speedrun start happening?
Just over 3 years ago now, actually. It ties into the story about when my PC broke for Titanfall 2, in that when my PC broke, I was quite lost. I didn't know what I was going to do because everything I speedran was on PC, and I was a little taken aback. I was obviously a little upset. I wasn't really sure where I was going to go from there, and I always had it in mind that I wanted to try a Yakuza speedrun, and that kind of just like pushed my plan along. And most people assume that I started with 0, which I didn't, because the main reason why I started speedrunning Yakuza games was there was a online marathon. It was the very first marathon that accepted me, even before ESA for ESA Summer 17, and it was an online marathon that you certainly know well, called Shots Fired. And for one of their Shots Fired, I decided I'm going to speedrun the game that no one likes, Yakuza Dead Souls, the third-person zombie shooter. And yeah, that's when it began. I realized I still don't like Dead Souls, so I'm going to start speedrunning the mainline series.
Now, had there been a lot of other... Because you mentioned that you felt like at the very beginning with the Yakuza community, you had Tapioca, Zanaso, but for the most part, were you doing much of the routing from scratch yourself, or in collaboration with the other 2 runners?
most of us, it depended on the game. Most of us, like, Zanosso and Tap did the routing for the OGs. I've done pretty much all the routing for Zero over the last 3 years, with a couple of exceptions recently. The other games, like, when more people came along, like, with the Yakuza Kiwami run right now, Lily came along and found, like, one of the only glitches that we've got in the Yakuza series, in that it's a damage glitch and it only exists in Kiwami. No idea how she found it, but it's stunning. And then from that, she created that route herself. And then you've got runs like the remastered collection, so 3, 4, and 5. I feel really bad because, like, with 3, I was kind of there near the beginning. With Tap and with 4, I was almost there at the beginning. And then with 5, I disappeared. But K2, for example, is a route that I started on, and then thanks to more and more people getting into that run, because it's, 1, the quickest Yakuza run, and 2, it's a really nice, simple run, we've gotten to the stage where, even to, like, today, we're still trying to, like, find the most optimal, like, weapon route and stuff, and that's something that's been going on between a couple of us. But it's definitely... I'm definitely not somebody that's been doing the bulk of routing recently. That's been more the other community members.
All right. So earlier I asked you what your favorite and least favorite speedruns were, and somehow on both of those you managed to not say any Yakuza games. But you've run a lot of Yakuza games. I'm gonna need your favorite and least favorite Yakuza speedruns.
Does spin-offs count? That's the question.
Yeah, I'm gonna. You can include the spin-offs. You want to say Dead Souls for least favorite? You're welcome to do that.
No, actually, that'd be Fist of the North Star, but you're close enough. Fist of the North Star worst and 6 best.
Okay. Oh, you get to do your favorite for AGDQ. That's so cool.
It is. Zero was my favorite for the longest time, and like Zero is still the run that I will fight for. I had a run yesterday that somehow was a minute ahead that just died in a way that even 24, like not 24 hours, but even like 16 odd hours later is still exceptionally painful. So I still love that run dearly, but like 6's run is just, it's crazy. Like all the Yakuza runs are different. Everyone would assume that most of the Yakuza runs are pretty similar between runs, but there's something different in every Yakuza run. Unique. With Zero, for example, it's a more traditional brawler style. With K2, for example, it's a weapon-based route because we can make weapons like in fights as well as obviously outside of fights and store them. 6 is the sadistic one, and I absolutely love this run for all the wrong reasons, because 6 has a stat system where you start off with a base 100 in every single stat, and then during chapter 3 or 4, a very early part, we get 2 pieces of equipment, the Bloody Fundoshi and the Bloody Binding, which raise our attack by 55, breaks it over the soft cap of 200, so we can go a little further beyond, gives us extra heat generation for heat moves and stuff like that, but takes our defense of 100, drops it down to 50, and we don't get anything to supplement at all, because that would just be slow and use up attack upgrades. And honestly, even on easy, from about halfway through the game, you die to bosses in like 3 hits. It's a sadistic run, and I absolutely love it. And there are some bosses and even normal enemies that have a near infinite combo, which is just, it's great. Oh, it's great. I love it.
Wow. That's a thrill. Jeez.
Yeah, see, I have a reason why I'm surprised GDQ accepted it. Like, I fully said, I can make this more marathon safe. I'm going to do some marathon safe strats for GDQ, but like, it's still one of those runs that just, it's very pulse pounding as well, because 6 being the first game in the Dragon Engine, 95% of all cutscenes are now skippable. So in the older Yakuza games, there was this big meme that went around, not even in the speedrun community, but in the actual Yakuza community, where it was completely random, like what cutscenes you could skip and what cutscenes you couldn't skip. So usually the rule of thumb was if a cutscene was leading into a fight, you couldn't skip it, but that wasn't always a definitive one. But in the Dragon Engine, you can skip 95% of cutscenes, which makes the speedrun of 6 really fascinating, because the first like 30 to 50 minutes, it's essentially a boss rush. In the first 30 to 50 minutes, you fight like 9 to 10 different bosses. Like, it's really fast paced. I really like it a lot.
Damn, that's yeah. I mean, I'll get there someday. We'll see. It's gonna be a little bit, but I'm always. I have such a love-hate relationship with these games. I love the soap opera, but sometimes I get very frustrated with bosses. So I'm very curious to see what that's like. A thing I wanted to ask. I know not too long ago. I want to say maybe a few months ago. You did like a single sitting full series playthrough, right?
Yep.
Now. Was that planned from the start, or did that just at some point you say, "Oh, well, now I know this many. I guess this is where I'm going."
It was something that I've always had in mind. It was something that I always said to myself, I'd like to do this to kind of challenge myself. I definitely didn't want to. I think when I was originally thinking of it, I said to myself, I do not want to do it before the remasters come out on PS4, because I don't know if that run is still there or not. It's not a great run. There's a run of Yakuza 5 on the PS3 on the leaderboards that's like 8 to 9 hours long. There's a death or two in there, and it's not obviously the route optimized as to make it over the last couple of months or so, but it's still not something that I wanted to do on PS3 with how long those load times were. So when they eventually came out on the remastered collection, and I eventually got around to running them because I did take my time, it was definitely like on the cards for a while. But when I decided to do it, funnily enough, like when I decided to do it, I just decided to do it. I thought originally I was going to like plan it out for a long time, but it was like literally like a week beforehand. I was just like, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to do this next week. I don't care. And started selling out for it, and yeah, it went well. It was 0 to 6, so all 7 mainline games, and I did it in 24 hours and 20 minutes with one cursed PC crash. 17 hours in.
Well, that's
during Yakuza 5.
Not too bad, I guess.
Yeah.
So the other thing I wanted to ask about, you mentioned this already, that typically most of the runs are done on easy because that's what's fastest. But I know from listening to your commentary, and for example during Yakuza Kiwami 2, that some people do legend runs, and I think you are probably. Do you do the most legend runs, or has this grown more in popularity with time?
I think I probably do the most legend runs because the games that I run can be run on legend. That helps. I'd say there's probably only 3 Yakuza games where their normal any percent strats translate into legend, which is ironically 0, Kiwami 2, and 6. For example, with Kiwami 1 and its damage strat, you can't achieve that on normal or over, because what you have to do is you have to grab a boss and then do this charge throw, which is called Max Crush. And obviously on the higher difficulty settings, bosses don't like to be grabbed or thrown at all. And even if they do, you have to tap it, which means that you have to tap the button, so you can't actually do that charged throw. So, like, for example, with Kiwami 1, you would have to do brand new strats. Yakuza 3, for example, which turns into literally shoot everything, bosses get more resilient to guns, I believe, so you wouldn't be able to use those strats either. It's one of those things where it's kind of lucky in the 0, K2, and 6, which are probably the 3, I'd say, are the primary Yakuza that I run. They at least easily translate into legend. For everything else, we would have to reroute it, and I think for some people that's just like a lot of time. For some of the games, it's also kind of terrifying. With Kiwami 1, for example, the reason why Kiwami 1 runs are so kind of infuriating is that in Chapter 2, you have to fight this raid boss as part of a tutorial. The game expects you not to win, but if you do win, you get 100 levels of experience, which we utilize in the speedrun instantly. But obviously you won't get that buffer on Legend unless you want to fight that raid boss and beat that raid boss, which, yeah, good luck.
Now, we've already mentioned, of course, that one of your upcoming goals for... Actually, I guess I should mention 2 things. Right now, if you're watching and listening to this live, then later today, there's going to be a Kenzan race, speaking of spin-offs.
Yep.
So maybe go check that out at some point. More importantly, of course, is the Yakuza 6 going to AGDQ 2021. Do you have other immediate plans for the Yakuza series speedrun stuff, whether that be other spin-offs, other, series playthroughs,
Yep. I mean, obviously, in 3 days' time, Yakuza 7 is coming out in the West, so
Another
that's
one,
obviously...
yeah.
Yep, that's obviously the big one. I always get asked, like, am I ever going to run Yakuza 7? And it's kind of like, probably. I can't tell right now. You never know. Like, I might not like it. It's one of those things that, again, some games are great casually that just don't translate well to speedruns. Cough, Fist of the North Star, cough. But I've had in mind that, and people think I'm crazy for this, when my schedule frees up a little bit, I'd like to do the 0 to 6 every month if possible. I would personally like to do one legend run a week if possible as well. But it all depends on, like, the next big thing is 7, where I'll be doing a 100% casual playthrough first, because I never want to sully a Yakuza game's first experience with a speedrun. I just don't want to ruin that experience. And then, even if I don't like it, I think it's safe to say I'll probably do at least 1 of 7. So that's the other thing, and that's the interesting thing, because in the Yakuza community, most of us only have experience with action games, obviously. So for this genre shift of going to a turn-based JRPG, that's a new thing for most of us. I've obviously done runs, as I said earlier, Final Fantasy 13, but I've never routed a turn-based JRPG, and I think it's the same for a lot of the other community members, in that whenever we approach a new Yakuza run, we know kind of the basics of it and what to expect with the brawling system, but now everything gets flipped up on its head, so we don't have any idea of what to do. It's great.
But I mean, hey, at least RPG Limit Break is going to have to admit that Yakuza is an RPG now, right?
Yes, please. It's so funny because, I absolutely adore RPG Limit Break, and honestly, I think that we all agreed beforehand we had more chance of getting a Yakuza into an RPG Limit Break than we did a GDQ. And, myself and Tap especially, I think maybe Lily as well last year, really tried to get a Yakuza into RPG Limit Break, which wouldn't have happened this year anyway because of world events, but we made a really hard push for that, and we didn't get a run in at all. I wanted to ask for feedback, but I was in Sweden at the time and also had some bad personal news about kidney stones, so I ran out of time to be able to ask. But that's one of my long-time goals as well. I said before that I wanted to get a Yakuza into an RPG Limit Break or a GDQ. Now it's an RPG Limit Break, and I would quite like to move to Japan next year, if possible, obviously all things withstanding. And if I do that, I wouldn't mind getting a Yakuza game into an RTA in Japan. I think that would be super cool.
That always seems like such a cool event. I every now and again I see videos from that because of my exposure through the Armored Core Speedrun Discord. It always seems like such a great group. Before we get to the wind down questions, I did want to stop by real quick because we already talked about Titanfall 2. We've talked about Yakuza. There was one other video that I watched in preparation for this, which was your ESA 2017 Attack on Titan speedrun. And I just wanted to ask about, because I know for a fact that this is something that you seem to have kept around as sort of like maybe a marathon workhorse or something. Because I can remember earlier this year, I think we had back-to-back runs again at ESA together. And then we both came in a half hour underestimate.
Yes.
So I was just curious, what brought you to playing that game and speedrunning that game, and how has it stuck around like that for you?
Yeah, I don't know how. It was one of those that and it's the same advice that I'd ever give to anybody that wanted to get into speedrun, that you speedrun the games that you enjoy playing. Don't just speedrun something for the sake of trying to speedrun something, because I had the same when very, very brief period where I wanted to speedrun Mario Odyssey, realized that I wasn't getting along with the movement, so stopped running it because I knew I enjoyed doing it. But with Attack on Titan, I played that game casually on stream, and I really enjoyed it. A lot of people get really surprised when when you say that the best thing about Attack on Titan is its gameplay, because whenever you usually think of any anime crossover games, you usually think to yourself, okay, that's not going to be that great quality. But Attack on Titan was actually really good. Like, they said in the developer interviews that the first thing they ever worked on for Attack on Titan was the movement system. Obviously, the main important thing for Attack on Titan is to get that right. And they absolutely did. And it was just so satisfying. I would say that the movement is better than like the new Spider-Man in certain situations. It's massively fast-paced. It has a surprising amount of speed tech to it. It has more speed tech than some of the Yakuza games, for example. And it also has the AI breaking completely. Like, in the Attack on Titan scene, there is infamously Eren just humping a tree in one of the final missions that can cost you 1.5 minutes because Eren really likes that tree. And we've never found a way to stop him from just walking into a tree, for example. It just started happening at one point. And it's stuff like that. Like, Attack on Titan is never going to be, like, my absolute favorite speedrun that I've ever done, but I love it. Like, it's like one of those personal choices for me. It's like just, it's something that I always offer to marathons every so often because it's that nice feeling of going back to it. It's that nice feeling of, it's a comfy run. It's not awful. It's something that I really, really enjoy. And it's one of those speedruns, again, that I would credit to me getting into speedrunning quite a lot. And yeah, I really like it.
Cool. No, it's great to have those. I think, it's one of the things that's nice, especially as, we learn more and more games and our approach to speedrunning gets better, then we can just sort of have games like that, especially to revisit too, because I think you mentioned that it helped you get into speedrunning, but also, clearly coming back to it. I think that, didn't that end up being your PB at ESA together? Yeah. So,
yep. PB world record by 2 minutes. 2 minutes after I struggled with that run for trying to grind it to like the sub 140 for years. It was ridiculous. Yep. And it's also kind of funny because it links back to kind of like how big speedrunning has gotten as well, because I woke up, well, I didn't wake up, I was obviously doing the donation reading for your run beforehand, and whilst that was happening, my phone started blowing up and I was like, what is happening here? And randomly, like, I hadn't had any contact with them, out of nowhere, the social community manager for the European Koei Tecmo Twitter had just shouted out my run. I was like, what? And funnily enough, I noticed it a couple of weeks later where they did it again, but with the Gust Marathon that happened on RPG Limit Break. So speedrunning is definitely like getting more mainstream as well. I noticed that with Attack on Titan of all things, and it's like, I don't know who is running that social media account, but props to them for just like shouting out speedrunners in the speedrunning scene.
And and a tip for all speedrunners too, if you're really trying to play the content game, try and make ties with the the social media folks for whatever games you run. There some of them will pay attention. I think the Just Cause people have muted me. I'm gonna be honest, but we'll work on it. We got 2 months to work on that.
I was gonna say I've definitely had contact or two from Sega over the past couple of weeks, which
cool.
Can't exactly talk about.
No, we'll look forward to that. All right, let's start to wind things down. One of the things I like to do, it's an interview series, I like to add a little connective tissue. And so I got a question from my previous guest for you, my current guest. Catalyst, the Dark Souls runner, had this question for you. Do you remember the first task that you saw? And was there anything in particular that impressed you about it that you could recall? I was worried about this one. I don't know if I could answer this.
Yeah,
because I know for a lot of people that they like, there's a certain category of people who talk about the Mario 3 task like it's a sacred text, like that late 2000s one. But I never saw that one myself, and so like trying to think about it, like I this is one of the ones where I was like, oh god, I don't know if I can answer this.
It was definitely a task at a GDQ.
Yeah, it would probably be a task bot at GDQ.
Definitely. I don't remember the first one I saw, but I definitely remember the one that had the biggest impact, which was the one where they had the Game Boy camera and they took it around the room. That was pretty damn impressive.
No, that's a good answer.
I know there was one before that, but I don't remember, unfortunately.
Well, in that case, we can hit the eject button on that. But that does mean that I do need from you. Now, here's the deal. You're gonna give me a question for a speedrunner. The question doesn't have to be limited to speedrunning. Could be speedrunning, gaming, whatever. I'm going to DM you the name of who it is, but only after you give me the question.
Sure. I should have had something more prepared. I did have something in mind, but I have my memory's not been great lately. Just getting old again. I guess I would ask if there's one speedrun trick from any kind of speedrun that you've ever seen outside of what you speedrun. What trick would you like to bring into your speedrun? So stuff like obviously Mario's like back jumping, etc., or just like out of bounds stuff, or like movement tech with like grenades or stuff like that.
All right, I want to tell you right now, this is not intentional. This is not a setup. I didn't do this intentionally. But that's the next guest. So
oh, that's perfect.
So
that is perfect.
Yeah, no, I didn't even realize that. I was like, oh, wait a second, this is oops.
That's so awesome. They're gonna have a good answer to that for sure.
So you've already mentioned, of course, Yakuza Like a Dragon will be an answer to this question. But are there other future games or other things that you are excited to play in the future that you can say without breaking any legal agreements?
Funnily enough, like over the last couple of weeks or over the last couple of days, I've kind of going back to that conversation from earlier, I kind of want a PS5 at this point, just to like see what the differences are for the Yakuza games, but also like on the PS5, I kind of want consoles. Really, I've always been a big fan. I see Final Fantasy 16 whenever that comes out. Whatever expansion is next for Final Fantasy 14, again, obviously goes back into the multiplayer stuff. Pretty much just that. There's not much on my radar outside of that. People hate it when I say it, but I just don't care about Cyberpunk, for example. I know people that really do, but I just don't care. Probably get it in a couple of years' time. Whatever. I never got The Witchers. I've owned The Witcher 3 for years. I just don't care. I'll play it when I play it. Whatever. I can't really think of much else at the minute because like my mind is just so focused on Yakuza. I wouldn't mind playing. If I'm a little annoyed about it, I wouldn't mind playing the DMC5 Special Edition because obviously I speedrun some DMC5. I really want to play like the new difficulty and the turbo stuff as well as obviously the new character. But you know, the PC only gets the new character. Yeah, sure, okay, thanks. Need a PS5 for that.
Yeah, no, that's that. I think I heard about that. That's frustrating, but I guess I guess in the long run, hopefully things will get ironed out.
Yeah, the really frustrating thing is like people are just like, oh, PC people will mod it in, and the modders have like said specifically, there's reasons why we can't do this. So
yeah, it's when you're modding in something that's like a paid DLC thing. There's a lot of things around that you don't want to touch that usually.
Yep. Yep.
Well, in that case, let's really truly conclude this. Where should people be looking for you? Because I know you changed some of your I swear the other day I was watching. I think I was watching Tapioca's stream, and I was like, I need to find a new guest. And then I saw you were there, and I was like, oh, I'll go ask Froob. And I went to your Twitter profile, and you still had twitch.tv/FroobMcGuffin in your Twitter profile. And I was like, well, let me ask him first if he wants to be a guest, and then I'll mention that he has the wrong link in his profile. And then I came back like 45 minutes later, and you had fixed it by then.
Yeah, like I'm very, very bad at updating things on time because like that had been a very short thing. Like I'm very surprised at how quickly because I I had to email partner support because when they said they were going to release names back in the pool from Justin TV, I think they've done that once. I don't think they've ever done that again. So I had to contact them, and then I realized I had to change my name everywhere, and it's a massive pain. I had to change my Discord name. I can't change my Twitter name because Twitter won't allow it, and it's frustrating. But yeah, I am now just twitch.tv/Froob. There's no MacGuffin. If you want to find the MacGuffin, that's on Twitter, twitter.com/FroobMacGuffin. My YouTube has a funny name. I don't care about my YouTube. It's just for VODs and PBs.
All right. No, well, of course, if you're watching or listening on YouTube or Spotify, wherever, all those links will be available in the description, along with links to some of the VODs that I had watched. In particular, of course, the Kwame 2 SGDQ VOD was very, very good, worth watching. Froob, thank you so much for all this time.
Thank you for having me. First time I've ever been on something like this. It was really fun.
Now, I do need one more thing from you, which is that I'm going to say a cheesy catchphrase like, let's boost on out of here. And then when I say that, I need you to give me a rocket engine noise.
Sure.
Okay. Folks, thank you so much for listening. Let's boost on out of here. Awesome. Folks, do you have time, or do you need to bounce right away for getting ready for the Kenzan race?
Depends on Hoxie and Tap. I mean, I was supposed to have installed Kenzan beforehand, which I didn't do. Thumbs up once again. I mean, I could just put that on just now, actually. Like, where is my DualShock?
Well, if
I'm okay to answer some stuff. It won't take too long.
If anybody in chat has a question, speak now or forever. Yeah. Why, Froob, why didn't you install Kenzan?
I know where the game is, all right?
I mean, here's your chance. Here's your opportunity. Why? My question is, why didn't you install Kenzan? Very topical.
I shaved and I had to shower, and you know how long it takes to shower when you're bored? It takes like 30 minutes, it takes forever to dry my hair.
We're getting some criticism here. Some people felt like your engine noise was more a regular car engine than a rocket engine. Do you want to defend what you did there?
No,
because I'm not here to criticize. Yeah, I'm not. Look, I'm not. I'm
no.
just okay.
Just no. It's fine. Just rocket engines come in different sizes. All right, don't shame the rocket engine that can't. All right. It's not cool.
Well, Frank is interested. Are you just trimming your beard? That's what I assumed you meant by shaving. Yeah. Okay. That's.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, you have unless you keep your dome bald. But I don't know. You have the hat on. It's a mystery.
I try to, but sometimes I get very lazy. Currently, I am very lazy. I'm not going to show obviously all of it, but like you can see kind of like down this side, for example, you can see the hair. What you can't see is the fact that also, so I've got that classic problem where my baldness is literally all on top and the side like grows in so fast. And not only am I now getting like massive amount of grays in my beard, but all of like the only bits of hair that grow around the side of my head, full of gray, completely full of gray. So yeah, that's the other reason why it gets shaved often. It's one of those things where just it's really annoying, and actually funnily enough, that's why I have this beard, is that when I came out of university, which was like 6 years ago at this point, I said, I'm never gonna fully shave until I find a job. I've not fully shaved in 6 years. It's been a rough couple of years. So I like to trim because like I know when it's time to trim because like my mustache grows in like really thick, and like anybody who's ever had a mustache knows that when the mustache gets too long or too thick, you start having problems whenever you start like drinking anything or when you start eating, and that's just disgusting. So when it gets to that stage, it's just like, all right, time to go. I'll just get rid of half of it.
Cool. We got any other chat questions, or can I release the Froob to the wilderness? Speak now or forever hold your peace. I feel like I should do like a soundboard thing for this, like a timed. Do I even have anything right now?
It's one of those things as well. I wish like now that I'm kind of like Twitch partner, it's kind of like, well, your production quality is crap, and it's like, yeah, I know. I should really, start working on stuff. I really want like a stream deck. I know everybody has like stream decks and stuff, but I'm just sat here like a normal person, just clicking buttons in OBS and just being all like, why isn't this working?
I do have a stream deck. I feel like I don't use it enough. I mean, I have like some soundboard things. I mostly just have a scream noise that I really like to use, just to throw that in all the time. But all right. Well, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say that's the awkward problem is that like my stream PC, the cursed PC, is on Windows 7 because when I tried to put it on Windows 10, it kept blue screening every time I tried to turn my PC off, and like the Stream Deck only works with Windows 10, so I'd have to like mitigate everything to being done via the game PC because I capture it via OBS on the game PC. But then I have to switch out for my capture card, which means that the Stream Deck wouldn't work half the time. So it's like, there's no point. Might as well just keep doing things normally. Technology is a pain in the backside.